e4, g6, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, c6, and knight f3. Actually here, this is one of the most popular reply against the modern Pirc, and exactly here we don't go to this Gurgenidze type of play with d5. Of course, I did play myself like this. We analyzed this a lot with Chebanenko, with all his students. We played it, but the theory is moving, and my final conclusion was that this is a normal move, d5. It's normal position, but I prefer here to approach mostly to this Pirc type of positions and to play here d6. Because what is going on, this, as we say, this pawn c6 against knight c3 is very well orientated. Bishop is already developed in g7. For example, if we will later on play some knight f6, knight d7, a5, we will have the improved version of Philidor. And Philidor, if you remember, the bishop is on e7, and black is struggling to play rook e8, bishop f8, and so on. Here already bishop on g7, this is a good news. Of course, white, meanwhile, can try to put some pressure, straight pressure. So after d6, already here, in this chapter, we will check two lines with bishop e3 and a4. a4 was played against me by Vjekoša Živković in 2008. Knight f6. h3, short castle. Of course, the setups with bishop d3 or bishop e3 we will check in separate file. Here we will check the setup with bishop d3, which makes sense. Knight bd7, short castle, e5. So our pieces are same like in Philidor, except that the bishop is on g7, which is improvement comparing with Philidor. Here, after e5, he took on e5 and put the bishop on e3. From my, let's say, experience, what I didn't make a special study on this or researches, but my feeling was always that against bishop on e3 is always good to put the queen on e7. First of all, this the e file, I don't know, it's close to bishop by bishop, but also it's important to control the square c5 for the knight. Knight d2, knight c5, bishop c4, rook d8, queen f3, knight e6, typical maneuver, knight d7, knight c5, knight e6, knight d4, and he tried to control the square. I bring one more knight into the play with knight h5, with good play for black. That's about this plan with h3 and a4. Different transpositions. I just show you what happens if he doesn't put the bishop to e2, he puts the bishop to d3. The other move here is 5 bishop e3. Then we should go knight f6, and let's say he is trying to mate us with queen d2, long castle, and so on. Against this plan, I would prefer immediately to make pressure on his queen side in case he castles with queen a5. This is one point of this move. At the other point, this queen on a5 supports the plan e5, and this is really one of the main plans. So here he might try to switch for bishop d3, and now he wants to play bishop h6, because bishop h6 immediately was not possible, because take and knight takes e4 using the spin. So bishop d3 protects the pawn on e4 and prepares bishop h6. Here, after bishop d3, we already have a nice choice. Gavrikov against Adams, he played himself knight g4, bishop g5, e5, d5, d5, bishop c4, queen c7, long castle, and knight d7. We have a typical situation. Of course, we didn't blunder a mate on d8, but after all the structures with d, it's good to discuss this a little bit more deep. The game itself went king b1, which is typical prophylactical move. short castle, it's okay. And bishop b3 he played, Michael Adams. Knight f6, h4, knight c5, h5, going straightward, so he's not afraid of knight e4, but this would be risky. Knight b3, ab, a very strong move, bishop g4. The point is that if he goes h6, as it was in the game, bishop h8, queen e3, knight h5, black is controlling very well the situation. This pawn on h6 is not that dangerous. Later on the game ended to a draw. That's one option after bishop d3, and another one is even e5. I think, as I said, it's a normal move here, but we will check mostly here the move bishop g4. It's a bit fresh, but the point is that now since he moved this bishop to d3, now making the move bishop e2 back, it looks a little bit weird. So that's exactly our point. If he goes now knight g1, then we already play e5, and after f3 eventually we'll go bishop e6. If here he goes long castle, then knight bd7, king b1, e5, all typical moves, d, bishop c4, short castle, h3, take on f3, gf3. I already start to like this position for black, because after rook fd8, this was Arahamia against McNabb. I would already prefer black's position. So that's about this move 5, when he plays immediately bishop e3 with idea bishop d3, or h4 with idea bishop d3. In both cases our plans are about the same, to prepare e5, either with knight d7, e5 in case of a4, either of queen a5, e5 in case of 5 bishop e3.